Hey,
Hello,
Gary.
how's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Eh, as good as it gets, I guess.
As I like to say, good enough. Well, good morning. Thank you for
Good
joining
morning.
me.
You
I've
betcha.
been looking forward to this for a
Oh,
while
good.
now, so I think we'll have fun. I'll just do a little introduction. We'll get started as to not waste precious time or words because I'm sure you have plenty of nuggets of wisdom for me.
I don't know about that.
Hey guys, how's it going? Michael Troy here. I am super excited for today's comic chat. We are with the legendary grandfather of Image Comics and publisher of Big Bang's uh, comics, just all around comics enthusiast and lover and important voice and contributor to the world of comics for the past 30 plus years. I am so excited to be talking to Gary Carlson today. Welcome, Gary. How are you?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, Central Time Zone, where are you?
I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. I'm about
Oh, okay.
30 miles south of Green Bay.
Oh, nice. Yes, I'm from Ohio myself, so a fellow Midwesterner. And you can take the boy out of the Midwest, but you cannot take the Midwest out of the boy. It's so funny. I never shook my accent after more than half my life away, really.
I believe it.
Yeah. So, it's funny because I was watching a little interview with you. I like to do that sometimes just to get a little perspective and maybe not repeat too many things that you've probably talked about ad nauseum. But uh, you were talking about I think you started reading comics in 1961. Is that correct?
Somewhere right in there. Yep. I don't know exactly, but yeah, I was probably 4 years old. So
Yeah. I think many of us learned how to read from comic books. And what comic books were you drawn to initially? I would venture to guess superheroes, given your publication history.
oh yeah, totally. I mean, in DC Comics, I mean that's pretty much what I noticed on the shelves, and that's pretty much what my brother was 3 years older than me, and that's pretty much at that point what he was reading and his friends were reading. So it was the mainstays. I mean, Superman and Batman, and a little bit later, maybe the Flash and some other things.
Yeah, thank God for older brothers. I have my older brother to thank for my comic book collecting. There was a girl down the street who used to sell all the comic books without the covers that I guess were returns and things like that with the big ballpoint pen or marker with 2 cents or 3 cents written on them. So of course, ruining the collectability, but gave us a treasure trove of stories and art. Um, what was it more for you, the art or the stories or both? When like I feel like a lot of people who are artists like notice the art sooner than people who are just in it for the stories and the characters and things like that.
Yeah, must have been both for me. I mean, I just remember. I mean, I loved the characters. A lot of the earliest stuff I read were I think they were 64-page giants. I mean, stuff that reprinted a lot of the 1950s stories. It was just fun. I mean, it just appealed to me, and I loved them. I loved reading them. So
It's interesting that you would mention that as the thing that first appealed to you, because then you would go on to sort of mimic that in your publication of your 64 page, like, I guess almost annuals in the beginning because of the time and effort it put to put those together.
yeah, with Big Bang, that was exactly the point, was to go back and try to mimic that early stuff. I mean, the 40s and 60s things. That's what I grew up on, and that's what I loved. And same with Chris Ecker, my partner on Big Bang, and yeah, that's exactly what we were doing there. So there you go.
Did you immediately know, like, how when did your love for comics translate into a desire to publish or create or write, or did you want to draw too? Or I find a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
I wanted
writers.
I wanted to be a cartoonist. I that was my thing. Probably from the time I was 8 years old, I knew that's what I wanted to do. A little bit later on, I discovered Alex Raymond's art, the Flash Gordon and stuff, and I thought, oh my God, this guy is great. But I think it was the movie How to Murder Your Wife with, I think, Jack Lemmon. He was a successful cartoonist in there and lived in a big, I don't know, apartment in New York or something. And I thought, man, that's what I want to do right there. And that's kind of the way I aimed for it all along. I mean, not so much just because of that. I mean, I loved the comics and was drawing. I mean, in kindergarten, I was drawing Superman and Batman and the Atom and whatever, which probably didn't appeal to the teachers so much, but it worked for me, so yeah, all along that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I realized I wasn't the greatest artist, and I never was and never will be. But I mean, I switched in junior high school year. I started drawing more funny cartoons and comic strips, and I worked in that direction for quite a while. Went to college in Chicago, Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, and then later on Columbia College, and they had animation and cartooning courses there, and that's what I was taking, trying to figure one of those directions for me. While I was at school, I met Chris Ecker, who was the manager of the comic shop I went to, and he was, while I'd been in school trying to learn to draw and this and that, he was just kind of doing it in fandom. And because I was tied up with school and eventually with working and school, we started working on comic strips. He was drawing them and I was writing and co-writing with him. I mean, he had a lot of ideas too. And we put a couple of strips together and we sent them off. I mean, in one of them, the Los Angeles Times Syndicate almost bought it. And they didn't. And then, I mean, they asked for more and that sort of thing. And then it fell through and we were both kind of bummed. And I was like, okay, I'm doing comic books. So that's how I switched from comic strips to comic books. And that's where Megaton followed in 1981 or 82.
Yeah, one of the things, so then you started, you got Megaton together, and basically it's an anthology. So you're using different artists. Are you writing everything, or you're using
pretty
different?
Much. I wrote pretty much everything in Megaton. Yeah, I mean, that the way that worked out was at that point I was going to the comic shows, and the artists, there were such good artists in Artist Alley, and they couldn't get work for Marvel and DC. And my thought was, this is stupid. I mean, someone could start their own company and hire these guys, and that's pretty much what I did. I mean, the first guy I asked was Mike Gustovich. I said, would you be interested in drawing stories for me? I mean, he said, yep. And I was like, then I went home, I had to come up with a story. And so I did. And then I was looking around for other artists, and it all worked that way. Yeah, I did. I wrote them. I mean, early on, I used the shooter method where I just kind of drew them out, as at one time, aspiring artist. I would just lay out a page and add dialogue and everything and send it off. And I'm sure these guys would get them and go, oh shit, what did I get myself into, But it worked out. And by the second issue, I learned best to type it up and look professional, at least, even if I wasn't totally, So
I don't know about that. Keith Giffen worked that way on Justice League International's doing layouts for Kevin McGuire, and I think that worked out pretty well. So I think it would be kind of fun to work off of a Gary Carlson drawn plot.
Well, it wasn't too bad. I mean, like I said, I mean, the first two main stories was the Megaton story that Mike Gustovich drew, and then there was a Ultra Girl story that Butch Geist drew, and it didn't seem to bother Mike Gustovich, but um, Butch had a friend of his rewrite the dialogue and stuff. I guess he didn't realize that I had intended it to just be kind of a spacer and then rework it when it came back, you know.
Right.
And that's pretty much the same format I work in now, where I'll send somewhere between a plot and a script with dialogue, but when the art comes back, I adjust it to fit the art and not cover up the art or go along with if there's something different in the art. So
I mean, Mike Gustovich and Butch Geist, that's pretty good company in the early days. I mean, those are two, Justice Machine and Micronauts. Two very great artists. So one of the things that you had mentioned in your early days of publishing that I really commended you for is that even though you really couldn't afford it, you were paying, arguably low, but you were paying page rates. And I feel like, that is so important to like an up and coming artist to feel that worth, that you're just making something for your work. So I think
that's
that
true. Actually making some money helps. And actually, getting published in a fairly professional looking book helps, and having pages to be able to take around to the big publishers helped too. Yeah, I wasn't paying a lot. I mean, back then it was $20 a page for pencils, $20 a page for inks, something for lettering, I don't, maybe $5. Yeah, I was working. I had a job, and a lot of my money went into that. Trying to. It wasn't as big a drain as it sounds, because it just took forever to get each issue out. I mean, there was probably a year or two to get the first issue done, and then it took another year or two to get the second one out. I mean, part of it because all the guys from the first one went off and got jobs at Marvel and wherever, so then I was forever finding new artists for whichever stories, and so it would have been a lot more expensive if I had actually managed to put out the book on even a bi-monthly basis, so.
Yeah, you're working with, it's funny because I mean, I don't know how you feel about the nickname that you've gotten as the grandfather of Image Comics, but that's largely because Megaton published early works from Rob Liefeld and Eric Larson, and also included, the first Youngblood and was it Dragon graphic fantasy?
Early Dragon, yeah.
Yeah, so
he had
that's
appeared
super
in
cool.
graphic fantasy, but Eric worked him into the Vanguard series. So Dragon was in there in 1 or 2 issues, and Youngblood was coming. We were supposed to, it was solicited as Big Bang Special #1 in 1987, and by then sales were down and down and down, and a book like that, it got, I really don't know what it had, orders for 100, 200, 300 copies. And I said, if I can't sell this book with such nice artwork by Rob, and the cover was with Jerry Ordway, is like, said, people don't care. By then, after 7 years, I was just burned out, and so we said, okay, time to give up. If this one won't sell, then the heck with it. And then Rob went on to DC and then Marvel, and then 5 years after I gave up on Megaton, they announced Image was coming, and Savage Dragon was going to be one of the books, and Youngblood was going to be another one, and we had put out a 16-page color Who's Who flyer called Megaton Explosion, and that one had a double-page pinup of Youngblood in it, and so that was technically the first color version. Some of the other books, later issues of Megaton and issues 1 and 2 of Ram and Grass Green's Wildman had one-page ads for Youngblood. So those were the first, far as I know, the first appearance of those, that, you know, the Youngblood characters.
So were you supposed to publish Youngblood and then it just wound up at Image instead?
Well, it was, you know, 5 years different. Yeah, I mean, that
Yeah.
was the plan, 1987, to put out the one issue as a special and see
Oh,
how it
right. But
went.
then, of course, going to DC and all that sort
Well,
of.
then, yeah, then he turned pro really and went, and then eventually came back to it, you know. And since it was there, he asked if I had any copies of the Megaton Explosion left, because he wanted to use those as a fly, you know, as a promo to push Youngblood #1 at Image. So I gave him the 100 or 200 copies that I had, and he used them. And yeah, later on, that's why he referred to me as the grandfather of Image Comics, because 2 of the guys had worked there and 2 of their characters were in there, you know. So that was where that came from.
Well, I think it's a pretty nifty nickname. So one of my favorite things that you have done is the Vanguard miniseries. So Vanguard had appeared before in some sort of capacity before that miniseries, correct?
Oh yeah, he was in Megaton. He was in must have been the first 4 issues of Megaton. I mean, that was, Eric and I worked on it there, and then Eric left, probably because it was taking me a year to get every issue out. And he was, if I just had him draw everything, I probably could have put the book out on a bi-monthly basis, you know. But
Oh, absolutely.
but I wasn't quite that smart, and I from the very start, I expected him to be the first guy to leave, to tell you the truth. I mean, he was a very good writer and a very good artist, and just, he knew he would. I learned a lot about writing comics and pacing comics from him, and I just thought, this guy's going to be gone. I don't want to count too much, and he wasn't. I mean, he was around for a while, and I think he finally left just because he needed to work and you know, to make the money somewhere else. So that's kind of where that went. So yeah, when they started Image, he came back and said, do you want to do a Vanguard book? Actually, when Image started up, yeah, I was a little bit famous again, you know, because of that father and grandfather of Image and blah blah blah. When I stopped doing Megaton in 78, I mean, the whole plan from the beginning with Megaton was not so much to do an anthology book, but to create a comic book company. And that's where, I mean, all the characters, I mean, Megaton and Ultra Girl was in there, and there was a kind of a Batman character called Crusader, and a fantasy story called Wizards of War with Dan Reed. And then there was Berserker, who was a cyborg warrior.
Is that Angel Medina? He drew that, yeah.
He drew that eventually, yeah, but not at first. I mean, everybody was going to draw Berserker at one point. I mean, I think I've got sketches with Eric's, you know, Eric drew some, Rob Liefeld drew some, probably even, you know, Angel and whoever. I mean, it was just one of those that it was kind of a fun character.
And it was seriously, like, I'm thinking like Vanguard and Berserker are so like poised and primed for like a comeback in some way, shape, or form, because they just really are very classic looking, very great characters.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I've always felt that way. But yeah, so I was almost famous, and people were contacting me about publishing stuff. I mean, Don Chin and Entity Comics asked, do you have any of this Megaton stuff left? Because at the end of Megaton, we were looking to split the books off into their own. It was going to be a Megaton book, a Vanguard book. Again, that special with Youngblood in it, and that's what the promo flyer, the Megaton Explosion was. Oh, all these new books coming, and it's like, oh, none of them came. we call it the megaton explosion, but it didn't work that way, you know. So, anyways, 5 years later, I mean, Don Chin printed the unpublished Megaton Holiday Special. Megaton Holiday Special. I'd been calling it Xmas, X-MAS, kind of like, you know, X-Men. I just thought that
Of
was
course, why not?
yeah. And then Caliber Press contacted me, and we had 2 issues of a Vanguard book done. And right before we set up to do that, then Eric contacted me and said, I would like to do a Vanguard book here at Image, but he didn't particularly care for the direction of those first 2 issues. So I just kind of set those aside. We started on the Vanguard book at Image, and Steve Adams, who'd been drawing the Vanguard stuff, we just switched over and did Berserker, and that's where Berserker showed up at the Caliber Press. I mean, we did 6 issues of Berserker, and then at Image we did 4 issues of Vanguard, and then 6 issues of Vanguard, and then there was a 4-issue miniseries a year or so later. And
so, interestingly, the first series was supposed to be an ongoing series. Is that right? And
that's
then it
right.
wound up just being a mini series. And one of the things that's also interesting, and it's funny because this is before the internet, so I'm sure this, you know, you find out these kind of stories later, but one of, I guess, the downfalls of the book was the lack of being able to keep a consistent art team. And that is actually one of my favorite things about the book, is the variety of artists. Like, it was one of my early introductions to the work of like Jason Pearson, whose issue is beautiful. Joe Madureira drew an amazing issue. Angel Medina, as we talked about before. Tom Coker, early Tom Coker, who has grown exponentially in talent since that first issue. But and I think Andy Smith might have been the last person, last artist. I could be leaving somebody out, but I absolutely love that series, and I think it's so good. So I think definitely needs to be collected in a trade paperback. Eric Larson, if you're watching.
That would be fun. I mean, you know, there were the 6 original issues, and then the 4-issue miniseries, and then there was the one special featuring Vanguard with Ethrian, and then we did a number of backups. I mean, we had started off to do, I think it was a 3-issue miniseries a couple of years later, myself and Frank Fosco, and the sales and numbers, it was another one of those points where numbers were down, and so it ended up being serialized in the back of Savage Dragon. So if I couldn't tell you what issues they were without looking, but I mean, yeah, I mean, there's 20, 40, maybe 60 pages of backups running 6 pages at a time in there. So
well, I'll be looking for those, because
yeah,
I've just made, after a long gap, I just made my return to reading Savage Dragon, and I saw
cool.
you had mentioned that that's like the one book you have been consistently
That's
reading
the only one. Yep.
forever. And
Yep.
it is so good. I love it. Like, just Eric's enthusiasm for comic books just comes through on the page. And it reminds me something of what I was thinking about. You know, it's like, I feel like we all are fans of the most and create the kind of comics we love that we grew up on. You know, you came up in comics of the 60s, and that's very evident in your Big Bang books. You know, Eric loved comics from the 70s, and it shows in a lot of like the homaging he's doing with the Marvel trade dress and
Yep.
the coloring style and things like that. It's like, I'm mostly like 80s comics, so that's like my thing. And I just think that's kind of the magic of comics.
Yeah.
But oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I agree. I mean, and that's it. That's one of the things that makes Big Bang a little tougher now, is that, I mean, when we started Big Bang in the early 90s, I mean, people had grown up on 70s books and maybe the 60s books and seen some of the other ones. But now the artists that are out there grew up on the 90s books or later stuff, you know. So is finding someone that's that enthusiastic about doing golden age and silver age stuff is pretty tough to find them wanting to do it and able to do it. So
True. Yeah. Um, um, I know an artist that we'll get to in a second, but um, yeah, I think that like I was always peripherally aware of Big Bang comic books, but I think that you know, it does have a certain kind of audience because it's like I wasn't such a fan of the Marvel 60s and you know 60s comics just because I grew up on the 80s until later. Like I'm much more of a fan of it now. You know what I mean? I
oh
look at
sure.
those comics in awe, and I think it'd be much more appealing to me. Um, but I do think it's a certain, like, definitely a niche audience for sure. You know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot of self-published books out there that are based on the older Marvel style and whatever. It's fun to see it out there. It's fun to see that there is a market.
Yeah, and like I said, I definitely like you know love that style now. And but so then, what led to so then how long after like Vanguard did you start? Because Big Bang started at Image Comics, am I right?
No, actually, it started at Caliber Press.
Okay.
Earlier, I mentioned the Berserker book, and the first 4 issues of Berserker, the backups in it, were Big Bang characters. The first issue introduced Night Watchman. Second one introduced Ultiman. I think the third one might have been a Dr. Weird story, and the fourth one was Brother Hood, who was all around part of the Night Watchman graveyard shift, which was kind of a play on the Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller, Dark Knight. So it started there, and then we did a mini series. It turned out to be at Caliber. It was supposed to be a 64-page Golden Age book, and then a Silver Age book, and then the modern book. But Caliber signed a deal with a distributor that was releasing them through Walmart. I think they were bagged books. I'm not sure. And so they had to be, I don't know, 32 pagers, or with 20 pages of content or something like that. And we had to split the Golden Age book into 3 issues. And so that became issue 0, 1, and 2. And then 3 was the Silver Age, and 4 was kind of a, well, it was definitely a 90s take. It was the called the Free Agents, and you know, done to look imagey. And then we left. I mean, we after 6 issues of Berserker, we took the time off, and I think there were some Dr. Weird issues there, and then we did the what I say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 issues of Big Bang. Caliber's distributor wanted to share the copyright. They liked them, but they wanted us to split the copyright 3 ways with them, with Caliber Press, and with us, and we weren't willing to give up our copyright. So we left, and Eric Larson said, hey, if you're leaving there, you want to publish the book here. So we just kind of switched over and went over to Image, and then started renumbering it at a new number 1, you know, because it was kind of an anthology book. There wasn't a real lot of stuff that had to be in any kind of order. So they reprinted the Caliber Golden Age stuff as a trade paperback. And then we just started in fresh pretty much.
So who are some of the artists you're working with at this point? I recall that gorgeous Alex Ross Thunder Girl cover. I mean, I feel like you were working with some pretty good artists at that point.
Yeah, that was the 0 issue at Caliber. I had seen a Mary Marvel painting he did that hadn't really been published, and asked if we could somehow adjust it, you know, adjust the colors on it to look like Thunder Girl colors. And he said, why don't I just do you a new one? And I was like, oh, I figured he was too busy and wouldn't want anything to do with us. But yeah, he did the cover. That was real exciting working with him. I mean, I'm not sure how famous he was at the time, but he was, I've always loved his stuff, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah, there were just a lot of artists that came through during the Big Bang years. I mean, from pretty much 92 to the mid 2005 or whatever, when we kind of moved away. I'm not even sure when we moved away from Image, but I mean Chris Ecker did a lot of the stuff. I mean, writing and or drawing.
But you were there for quite some time
At Image.
at Image.
Yeah, we did 35 issues at Image, and then maybe 8 or 9 one-shot specials toward the end. Yeah, it was just great. Some of the artists, I mean, Jeff Weigel, who is now drawing the Phantom comic strip, he was there. He had just a beautiful style that reminded me of Kurt Swan and Murphy Anderson. And when I met him at the Chicago Comic Con, I was like, oh my God, this looks like Swanderson, Kurt Swan and Murphy Anderson. And that's what people had been telling him, and that wasn't a good thing. And I said, no, that's wonderful to find someone to do that.
Yes, I think that's like an amazing comparison. And I love the Swanderson that like predates Brangelina by several decades.
Yep.
So
no, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Something super exciting for fans of Big Bang Comics, and just really made me happy to see it, is the much anticipated 30 years in the making follow-up annual to 1963, Alan Moore's 1963, being done by Don Simpson. Finishing up the promised annual in a like wild bootleg fashion, being published by Fantagraphics. It has all of his characters. It has cameos by a bunch of indie characters that I think he got from Steve Bissette. And you lended him some of your characters. I think I saw Thunder Girl and is it Ultraman? Is his name? Or
so. Ultraman, yeah.
So have you seen, yeah, I think so. Have you seen the art yet, or
just what's been on Facebook? I mean, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I love Don's stuff, and
yeah, I mean, he definitely has that old school look. So
yes.
Like the characters looked super appropriate and amazing, and I was just really happy to see that. So that would be a good, I mean, I think you definitely need to hype the heck out of that when that happens and sort of take advantage of that little nugget. I think that's very cool. And I think that's like, I like those kind of fun collaborations in comic books, like when Don did Megaton Man versus Dragon, and they both drew it together. I mean, like, that is so cool. I just love collaborations like that. And I think that things like that happen less and less these days.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I pick up Preview magazine every month, but that's pretty much as close as I come to a lot of the comics market. I mean, I had cancer a few years ago and spent a lot of time recovering, and one of my knees is bad, so I don't get around too much. My wife generally runs in the comic shop and pulls out whatever has been pulled for me. There's just a couple of issues, and then Previews magazine and whatever Eric has done, so I go through Previews, but don't really see a lot of this stuff. So there you go.
Well, congratulations on recovering from cancer.
It was a relief. Yeah. It was actually a relief to find out that I had it. I'd been sick for almost the whole year, and finally switched doctors and went somewhere else. And they said, oh, it's cancer in your upper bowel. So they took a lot of that out, and then it was on to recovery, 1 year being sick, another bunch of time recovering. So doing good now, no sign of it.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad you're here and healthy and looking good.
Thank you.
Were you so you did after you left Image, did you go anywhere else before you started? Because now you're still publishing, but you're doing a print on demand sort of
Print on demand.
situation.
No, when we left Image, we published 6 issues of Big Bang Presents ourselves. I mean, through Diamond, and it just, the sales just, you leave Image and you don't have the visibility, and the sales dropped, and it was getting tough to put it out. And it's one thing to put it out. I mean, Image pays for the stuff, and then they keep their fees out of whatever the book makes. And we got to a point where we were breaking even or losing a little bit and paying them. But away from a company like that, then you've got to pay for the promotion. You've got to pay for all the publishing up front. And that's a little harder to do out of your own pocket. So after 6 issues of that, we decided we better give up. And then a little while after that, AC Comics contacted me and asked if we wanted to be published through them. And we put out 3, technically they were annuals, Big Bang Universe, but they had to be, Image's deal is, not Image, I'm sorry, Preview's deal is a book has to sell X amount of copies and make X amount of money to be in previews. And so the books at AC Comics had to be 64 pagers and a $10 cover price. And it got first issue was whatever we'd had that hadn't been published. But then after that, it just got tougher to get 64 pages out of people and, into it. So after 3 issues there, we gave up and we had found Kablam and Indie Planet. So print on demand is pretty easy. You just go in and you can print up 20, 30, 50 copies. And that way the artists that worked on it have comp copies to take and sell at shows. And we decided to sell them through Indie Planet, which either as print on demand or the PDFs. And so at least it's not a lot of money out of the pocket. I mean, I'm retired now. Back over the years when I was working and had money to put into it, it was one thing, but this way is easy. So
Right. And I mean, obviously you're at this point, I feel like you're doing it mostly for fun. Yep. Right. So yeah. So I mean, there's some, you speak about Diamond and previews and stuff, but luckily after decades of having a stranglehold monopoly on the industry, there are so many other ways to publish yourself. There's Kickstarters. It's like, I think you would be very successful with like a Big Bang Kickstarter. So
we tried once. We have another book, a second book called Anomalies, and we tried a Kickstarter for there, but I think we set our goals too high and it just didn't attract attention. So that kind of scared us off a Kickstarter. We may try that again at some point. I mean, we got 1 or 2 things coming up that we could try with. I mean, and that's what everybody says, Kickstarter, but yeah, so far not.
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm kind of on the fence about it myself. It's like, on one hand, it's a great way to get comic books made that might otherwise not get made. But sometimes I think then it creates a vacuum. It's like if you didn't get it on the Kickstarter, then you sort of missed out on the comic book. So it doesn't really put it out there to the world. And then, I don't know, I'm humble, I'm Midwestern, I hate asking for handouts, you know what I mean?
Oh, I totally do, yes. That's it.
But this generation is so different, it's like that's what it's about, and they're all for that. And so, I mean, I guess, embrace the new and take advantage of it. People, yeah. I've contributed to a lot of Kickstarters, and I've been more than happy to. I mean, some of the most amazing comic books I've gotten in the past couple of years with some crazy good art is just, through Kickstarters. And I'm happy to help.
Well, that's it. And it's wonderful. I mean, geez, you see some of these things pull in $50,000, $60,000, and there's paychecks for the people that did it, because Big Bang, I mean, for a long time now, we've just been doing it for fun. I mean, everybody just kind of does it to do it because they're enjoying it. And it would be nice to have money to give to them, but I mean, we weren't making it at the end of the days at Image. We weren't making money printing it ourselves. They were breaking even at Americomics. It's just all along there just hasn't been enough money to pay people what we would like to, and even now, the books on Indie Planet sell 200 to 300 copies maybe after a number of years, total, but nothing that comes in and you pass it around. I mean, basically it pays, I send it in and we'll order 50 or so comp copies to send out to everybody, and we've been doing, we're up to issue 20. So it just keeps turning around, there's not a ton of money there, but it pays for that and pays for the postage to send it to people, so that's pretty much how we're doing it and why we're doing it that way. So,
well, see, once again, proving that there's many ways to make it work. However, you need to make it work for yourself. I'm going to encourage you to do a Kickstarter, though. I think you could. We'll be sending Gary on a world cruise with the money you make from that.
well, no, that's the thing. If you make the money, then I really have to turn around and share it with the people that have been doing stuff for free for so long. I mean, and there would have to be whoever was doing that issue would get a chunk of it. But yeah, I wouldn't feel good if I wasn't able to share it with some of the other guys. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, world cruise sounds kind of nice, but
right. How have you? When's the last time you've worked with some of your grandchildren, like Eric and Rob? Was Vanguard pretty much your last deal with? Did you and Eric co-write that together, or you wrote it entirely?
I wrote the first issue or two, and then after that, he asked if he could write the ones with Dragon in them. That was back in the Megaton days.
Mm-hmm.
So, but at Image, he was the editor. I sent him in, the plots or whatever, and he okayed them, and for all that stuff. I mean, and the miniseries that didn't come out but ran in Dragon. I mean, I've done some other backup stories in Dragon. I mean, some Golden Age stories of his Mighty Men character. I did some of those with Bill Fugit early on, and just lately there's been a few drawn by John DeHenry that run in the back of Savage Dragon in the 90s when Mirage Publishing was having trouble. I mean, they had asked Eric if he wanted to publish Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book, because he had guest starred them in one of the early issues of Dragon. I don't know. I don't remember these days if it was the mini series or when the series started, and they liked what he did, but he was busy doing Dragon. So he made a deal with them, and I wrote the Turtles, and my buddy Frank Fosco from the Megaton days drew it. We did 24 issues in the 90s, and before it was canceled. I mean, we knew it wasn't selling great. I mean, everybody was used to the cartoon Turtles, the cartoons on TV, the cartooning movies, and the Archie comics versions of the Turtles. And the point of ours was to kind of go back to the original Eastman Laird / Ronin, Frank Millery type style, and it just didn't catch on back then. But yeah, we did 24 issues of that. Those were just reprinted in the last couple of years by IDW in color, and they gave us a chance to do 3 new issues to tie it up, because it was just, the book was just, okay, we're pulling the plug. And um, so that was fun. But yeah,
Yeah,
Eric's,
it's funny because I mentioned to one of my friends that I was going to be talking to you, and they had mentioned your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I wasn't even aware of that, but it's sort of come up recently because you mentioned the artist Frank Fosco, and I see a lot of people mention that as him as one of their favorite TMNT
nice.
teenage artists. So I think that it's so strange because you're honoring the core of the title, and it's been so watered down by the cartoon and everything that you're displeasing the audience in a way that must have been very frustrating in a sense.
A little bit, you know. I mean, it was different than what had been going on in the books. And yeah, we, you know, do signings at comic shops, and there'd be people with their little kids, and we'd say, this isn't isn't the real cartoony version. You might want to look at this before you let your kids read this, because there was a fair amount of violence and fighting and that sort
So,
of.
so you were just asked to write this out of the blue. It's not something you really campaigned for,
Nope.
right? So that's like, I considered certain things like that sometimes happy accidents. What was your initial thoughts? Like how did you, were you given a directive, or other than like trying to make it a little more grim and gritty, I guess, what was your approach or take?
No, I mean, they pretty much left it up to us. I mean, the grim and gritty, I mean, what I did was I went out and bought all the back issues that had been done at that point, you know, and I keyed in on some of the real Key Eastman and Laird issues. The last, I don't even remember what they were now, but I was like, you know, this is the way I'd like to do it. You know, these particular issues. Oh, excuse me, and that's pretty much what we did. We sent it in. We'll put it past Eric, put it past uh, Peter Laird, and got the okays. And you know, I'd send every issue in, and they'd okay it and whatever. So we, yeah, it was fun. It's always fun to work with Frank. And the main thing, it was originally going to be a color book, but the sales weren't there. It became a black and white book. But even there, they were going back to the red masks, you know, the original series. All 4 turtles wore red masks. And when it went to cartoons and that, then there was, you know, a red mask, a yellow mask, a blue mask, whatever. But Eric said, I want them back in the red masks. So you have to differentiate them somehow. And it turned out that's where some of the violence came from. I mean, Raphael had his face burned off pretty much, and Leonardo lost a hand, and Donatello fell out of a helicopter and smashed his shell and some of his bones, and ended up being a mecha robot, basically, you know. So they were different. I mean, and people were like, oh, it's this image violence and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, yeah, it was, but some of this stuff, I mean, if you're fighting with swords, you're going to get hurt some points, you know. So
Right. I know I'm sitting here listening in horror. I feel like you shot Old Yeller or something, but
well, the funny thing was Peter Laird's first comment was, you can, why don't you go in and kill Splinter, kill Splinter off. And I was like, God, that's gonna really tick people off, you know. So Splinter lasted. The other guys had injuries, and everybody still thought it was too violent, and we were being mean. So
I'm proud of you for having the presence of mind to say no to that, because I feel like most writers' egos would be like, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna be that guy who killed Splinter. But then 20 years from now, after you do it, you don't want to be the guy who killed Splinter. You know what I mean? I feel like it's bitten a lot of writers in the ass, like some of the things that they've done, you know, in comic books that you just can't escape. I was going to mention examples, but I don't want to be negative, so I'm not going to. But
But yeah,
So
I was always glad we didn't. He's a big part of the team, so we left him in and enjoyed it. And yeah,
and
still.
he just would have been meaninglessly resurrected by now anyway.
Oh yeah,
So
totally, totally. I mean, they pretty much wrote us out of the continuity back now when we stopped doing it, and they started doing it again at Mirage or wherever, you know. So, um, like I said, when IDW did reprinted the stuff, they let us do 3 series, and we kind of edged the last couple issues back to where it wasn't so far out of the continuity with all the changes. I mean, we had them healing and reverting back to their main selves and stuff. So the robot body was gone and Raph's face was healing up, that sort of stuff. So
well, a very interesting footnote in your history,
yeah,
to say the least. So, did you ever get the chance to work your dream job and ever write for DC Comics?
technically, not exactly. I mean, at one point, I think Eric was writing 4 books. He was doing Aquaman at DC, Nova at Marvel, and maybe 1 or 2 more. I really don't know. He actually asked me to help him on co-write Nova, and I think I did a couple of issues there, but he switched me over to Aquaman because I was a DC guy, you know. So I did a couple of issues there, and there was a special of some sort that I did, and it was fun, but part of the problem, I mean, they were selling it on Eric's name, and the way it worked was, I mean, out of all the books he was doing, I mean, he was farthest ahead on say Aquaman, so it was lowest on his priority
Mm-hmm.
because he had to get the other stuff done. And so Image was, DC was on my back saying, "Where's the next one? Where's the next one?" And I was like, "You'd have to check with Eric. I mean, it's his book, you know. I'm co-writing it with him, but it's got to go through him, and he's, you know, got to do an issue. Dragon got to do an issue, this and that." And so they were on top of me. And then generally you work with an editor, and a lot of those editors would rather be writing the book. So they're like, "Why don't you do this? Why don't you do it that way? Why don't you do what I would do?" And so when I think Eric finally gave up. I mean, doing all those books had to be a drag, you know, on him. I mean, dragging him down, and he finally
Yeah.
gave up. I just thought, "Oh, I'm not gonna pursue this anymore." I enjoyed working on my own characters and being able to do what I wanted to do. And so that's really when I backed up and just concentrated on the Big Bang stuff.
So you primarily mostly worked and written for yourself.
Over the years, yeah. I mean, there
Yeah.
was, yeah, the bit on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and
As it,
those couple of things with Eric at DC and Marvel. And I did a few things for Rob's studios. I think they might have been all at Image at that point, you know. I did a couple things there, but yeah, for the most part, I was happy to be working on my own characters and pretty much doing what I really wanted to do. So that was how it worked out.
so what are you working on anything currently?
Just Big Bang. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in the works at Big Bang. I mean, I keep thinking it's time to take a rest and break down, but there's a lot of people have been coming up recently and asking if there was anything they could do. Of course, that happens all the time. I mean, there's a number of scripts that have been out to 2, 3, 4 different artists, and they start working on it, and then maybe a page or 2 of great looking stuff, and then they disappear and stop working on it. So eventually I send it to someone else. But I mean, right at the moment, there's a lot of Big Bang stuff coming. Just yesterday, we finished up a Megaton plot, plot script, whatever. A guy named Ray McKay had a good idea, so I was working with him, and went off to Ron Williams to be drawn. So that'll be coming up real soon. Chris Ecker's working on a Silver Age Night Watchman story that Ken Holzhauser is supposed to draw. I've got them written down here, otherwise I couldn't remember. There's an Astra story. She's like a space pinup girl almost. She was in one of the histories of Big Bang, and Charlie Boltner wrote a story, and Paul Banana drew it, and that's waiting to fit into an issue. There's another role-playing game chapter that Scott Casper did. We're still waiting to finish up the Night Watchman Creatures of the Night that Chris wrote, and Ben Torres is drawing. I mean, they're the ones that did the Night Watchman Graveyard Shift. Very, like I said, Dark Knight Returns style stuff. This one's more of a Halloween story. It's Night Watchman kind of. All the villains are very universal monstery ones. It's a lot of fun. Pedro Angosto's got a number of things going on. A Dr. Weird story drawn by Joan Vives. He's doing an art Roundtable of America issue with Louis Lorente. The last Whiz Kid story, part 3, is coming by Pedro and George Santa Maria. And that'll be one of the next issues coming out. That'll tie up the 3-part story there. And just all kinds of other stuff. Sterling Clark is working on issues 3 and 4 of the Night National Guardians, which was when we very first started publishing through Indie Planet. 2 of the first books we did were National Guardians books, and because they hadn't been solicited through Diamond, they turned up in one of the Americomics, AC Comics, Big Bang Universe ones. They were there in black and white, but we had done print on demand ones at Kablam, and so they were some of the first books we released on Indie Planet, and they're still out there. But now, yeah, he's got a 3rd issue underway and a 4th issue in the planning stages, and hoping to get those out this year. So there's a lot of stuff. It's enough to keep me busy.
I was gonna say, it sounds like you got a full slate, and that is good news. And a lot of my friends are fans of yours and of Big Bang Comics, so they'll be happy to hear that.
Yeah, that's great. Tell them to let us know what they'd like to see, and we'll see if we can pull it off. So.
Oh, absolutely. It was so nice to talk to you today, Gary. It was really great to get a lot of your insight and learn about your great history and comic books. I think you're a good example of how to do comics right. And it was so nice to talk to you. Is there anything you'd like to share with us, or any websites or plugs or anything you would like to get in before we wrap it up?
The Big Bang Comics website, it's just www.bigbangcomics.com. That's a fun site. I mean, and it's got our free promo. I mean, the spotlight on Big Bang Comics PDF. If you just go to the website, you can download it. I don't even remember how many pages it is, 40, 50 pages of, it's kind of the history of Big Bang back through the characters that started in McDonald's and Megaton and worked its way up through all the different printing companies. It's got some a listing of all the covers that have been published during that time, and what's available on Indie Planet, and previews of the upcoming books, the next couple of issues. And it's fun. I mean, for a promo, it's just free. Take a look, and what the heck, it's just kind of fun. I mean, the website itself has galleries with some of the characters and that. Actually, the spotlight's got 3 or 4 pages of biographies of the people that are currently working on Big Bang stuff and have in the past. The other one is my Megaton Comics website that I put up maybe 10 years ago. I really don't know. It's just megatoncomics.com. It talks about the issues of Megaton, the original issues. It talks about couple of issues of Ram and a couple of issues of Wild Man. And I mean, that the PDF, the free promo I had talked about, the Megaton Explosion, somewhere it's on there. You can download that for free and see the Megaton characters and that Rob Liefeld center spread of Youngblood. So, I mean, those are the two websites mainly. There's
one of my friends just sent me, and I reviewed it recently, a copy of the Megaton Explosion, and he's
cool.
like, do you want me to, do you have this? Do you want me to send it to you? And I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, I was thinking, like, God, is this worth like $500 or something? Probably not, but I think it might be worth a little bit of something.
You see a lot of those issues going out there. I mean, actually, on the Big Bang website, I sell back issues of the Caliber, the Image books, a few of the Megaton ones, I think, and I just sell them for $3 to $5. A lot of those, but yeah, out there you see some of those books going for big bucks. So we figure if we do a Kickstarter, that maybe a run of the books or some of the ones will be part of the incentives, you know, depending on what you spend. So
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it
well
seems.
I am glad that you continue to make comic books. I will put a link to your website in the description of the video so that people can find your fun 60s flavored Big Bang comics and keep you know, up with whatever's coming next from you. Thanks so much for having a chat with me today. It was so nice to talk to you, Gary.
Oh, you bet. It was great. Thanks very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care now.
All right. Bye.